Here we go. Welcome, families. Thanks for logging on. We really appreciate you plugging into this event. We love this event. We do this once a year. We're excited to share insight with our student athletes and families. Let me dive right in. My name's Tony Minestra. I'm the Director of College Counseling here at DePaul. So I'll be kind of the MC for tonight, but we have some great guests with us as well. We're going to start with some introductions. I'll maybe go through in the order that we planned tonight, maybe before we get to the next slide, coaches, and you'll just kind of introduce yourself, and then I'll pick the slides back up. We're going to talk about divisions, talk about what the differences are at the NCAA level and what that looks like. I'll give you a brief overview of what the Eligibility Center is and what function that serves. And then I'll get out of the way and we'll give you some perspective from the folks that have done this, right? That have played at the Division I, Division III level, crossed levels, coached at multiple levels, and they'll give you some inside scoop. We'll finish up with kind of a plan of action. I like to leave you with some things to do, whatever grade level you're at, 9th through 12th. We'd like to give you a plan of attack. Let me introduce myself first officially. Tony Minestra again. This event is really important to me. My identity as a student athlete is really at the root of why I'm in the career I am, why I chose the path I did, and how I got here. I'm extremely thankful for the coaching I've received along the way, for the opportunities that were given to me along the way. You see that little guy in the upper left-hand corner? That was my first year in organized sports in rural Michigan. Most of the friendships that I hold closest to my heart today are rooted in relationships I built in the locker room amongst coaches, amongst players. My family is first. I'm first generation in my family to go to college. You can see my proud parents on the upper right. It was a big deal for me to continue to compete at the college level and have that part of my identity. My parents carried that pride with them and still do. I turned my Division III playing experience in two sports into coaching. I love the connection we can build. I love the relationship-driven part that coaching can bring. Parlayed that into some stuff in the booth, and I've been coaching and finding my way connected to sports for most of my life. So it's been a big part of who I am, and I'm a big advocate. Coach Kazi, you want to say hello?
Sure. Hi, I'm Caroline Geisler. I'm the Assistant Athletic Director here at DePaul. I used to teach yoga and Pilates classes prior to this year here, so I was kind of a dual position. I'm also the head varsity girls volleyball coach here. My collegiate experience goes back to college, where I played my freshman year at DePaul University here in Chicago. I actually took a semester off and I went to Europe and I got some experience playing volleyball overseas in Poland. And then I came home and I transferred, and then played at Northern Illinois University. And then once I finished college, I jumped right into coaching high school volleyball, a whole slew of schools. And most recently was the head coach at Resurrection before this. And before that was, lower level volleyball, club volleyball. I think this is going to be my 29th season that I'm going to start. And that's obviously girls and boys and club included. So not 29 years of coaching, but 29 seasons or 29 teams of coaching. So really happy to be here, invited for a second year in a row. Excited to share my experience and knowledge that I have and to learn from the others on this panel today. So thank you for inviting me, Coach Minestra.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah. Mr. Ortiz, want to say hello?
So my name is Ulysses Ortiz. I'm one of the school counselors here at DePaul College Prep. I'm also the head JV coach for baseball. I played baseball at Lakeview High School, right around the corner. Went to college at Benedictine University, played ball there for 4 years. graduated, and then I coached at Concordia University, Chicago, for a year, and it just worked. I've coached a lot of different years in different high schools after that, and yeah, so that's kind of my path.
Excellent. And prior to my time here, I was at Loyola Academy, but my stop before that was at Elmhurst, now University, and that's where my path crossed with Coach Adams. Joe, you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Joe Adam. I'm the head football coach at St. Anselm College. We're a high academic Division II program out on the East Coast in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is about 50 miles north of Boston. So I am born and raised in Chicago, just the northern suburbs. And much like Coach Minestra, I'm a first generation college student who's a product of education. So I do believe that education unlocks opportunities. About to start my 28th year of coaching in college football. Started in junior college, coached at Division III at Elmhurst College. Got my degree from Grand Valley State, which was we were the #1 football team in the country in the mid 2000s back then. So got an opportunity to win 2 national championships at that level. Coached at Division I at Western Michigan and Syracuse. And then now I find myself here for the last 7 years at St. Anselm here on the East Coast.
Excellent. And we'll revisit their experiences a little later in the slides. So thanks for hanging in. Just some quick truths. Depending on where you're coming at this conversation from, some of these things may be new for you. For those that don't know, the NCAA, there are multiple pathways in, right? We'll talk about the different levels, but across the board, college athletes tend to graduate at a higher rate than what their non-student athlete peers do. If you look at national graduation rates, student athletes that remain connected to a program or dedicated to higher education and to their student athlete identity tend to graduate at much higher rates across the board. So that's good news. Sports scholarships. This is always a kind of a confusing topic for some. As you know, the funnel to college sports is fairly thin, although there are many different pathways in and a lot of different opportunities in a lot of different shapes and sizes. But essentially, just a handful of students that are high school athletes make their way to the college playing field or court. About 8 million students nationally is kind of the number that you hear are participating across the landscape in high school athletics. And under 500,000 end up competing at the NCAA level across all divisions. So it's a fairly small window, right? And of that group, there's a mixed bag in terms of scholarships, right? The term full ride is something that's casually kind of tossed around. What we know as a full ride is extremely scarce, even at the Division I level. There are limited number of programs that can offer those kind of packages. Certainly, they're the revenue-generating sports that we often catch on TV, right? They're the most popular media-driven sports. But truth be told, the vast majority of student athletes competing at the next level are either on partial or no athletic scholarship. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the slides ahead. In fact, the average scholarship across all scholarship level sports is under $7,000 a student. So I stole this slide, Coach Geisler. I stole this slide from our peer, Pat Mahoney, who's our athletic director. I absolutely love this slide. Pat, for those who don't know, was a Division I athlete himself. He runs our athletic program here at DePaul. He loves this idea of cup filler versus cup drainer. Why do I play sports? And he delivers it much more eloquently than I do, but I'll give it my best shot here. When we talk about cup filler, and we're talking about, do I want to continue in my sport? Do I want to, like I mentioned earlier for myself, do I want that part of my identity? Is that essential to who I am as a young person? For Pat, it's really simple. Do I like playing sports? Does it make me happy? Does it bring me joy? Does it help me balance out my physical and mental wellness? Does it bring balance to my academics? These are questions that should be yeses if playing sports is important to you at the next level. Do you like to compete? Right? Is that thrill of competition something that drives you? That's a question you should ask yourself as a young student athlete. Are you open to learning? And I sort of like to use this term. Do I have a closed mindset, or do I have a growth mindset? As an athlete, it's very difficult to be coached or to improve if you have a closed mindset. Are you willing to compete, and are you willing to take on direction and some of those life lessons we learn along the way? And how truly dedicated are you to that identity of student athlete? What does that mean to you? Are you ready to walk away from that after 12 years? Potentially, as a young person, or are you looking to maybe take that next step at the college level? A cup drainer is something that's going to take energy away from you, right? If your sport is something that you do for others, could be parents, could be friends, could be peers. If that's your sole motivator, that's draining your energy. That sports aren't bringing you joy at that point. Are you doing it for social reasons? There's certain sports programs, certain athletic identities that come along with being a teenager. Are you doing it for others, or are you doing it for yourself? Right? Are you doing it just to put a bullet point on your college resume? Right? Did you join the lacrosse team simply to look, one way or another to a potential post-secondary landing spot? Like, what is that? What's the motivation behind you playing? Right? And if you're seeking a scholarship, right, if that's the goal, I get that. There are certain families in certain financial positions where that scholarship is the road to college, but it can't be the only road. And there are no guarantees, especially in a very challenging environment right now in college athletics in terms of scholarships and offers. So, if you're considering these on the right as your primary reason for playing or remaining an athlete, I would actually challenge you to maybe look at the left-hand column and consider what those bring to your life. Does it bring you balance and joy? Let me quickly define divisions for those that may not be aware. At the NCAA level, we're talking primarily about 3 divisions. Coach Adam mentioned earlier about community and junior colleges. There's also another layer of complexity, and that's the NAIA. Today, we'll be largely focusing on the NCAA and what that brings to the table. Division I, we know these schools. I'll give you guys a couple examples in the next few slides. There are full and partial scholarships offered at Division I. Division I are typically the schools that you're going to know. They're going to be the ones that are more casually available to fans. Some that might surprise you, but generally speaking, those big ticket schools that you're going to catch on ESPN, they're going to land in that lane. Division II. This is an area, I grew up in a very Division II rich state in Michigan, a great league, great athletic league there. Still scholarship available. They serve a smaller number of student athletes, and you'll notice on the slide deck moving forward, a pretty diverse set of institutions, pretty wild group in Division II, but also a group to consider. Division III. Coach Ortiz and myself are products of Division III sports. Division III is the largest of the 3 divisions, over 440 members across a variety of campuses. No athletic scholarships are offered at the Division III level. Coach Adam and I have spent time coaching at that level. That can create different conversations, right? We're driving the recruiting process largely on academics, and we can talk about what that looks like here in a little bit. Here's just a sampling of what Division I schools can look like. I purposely presented Illinois' Division I schools because not all of them have football, right? In fact, just a very small number of them. So you'll see schools that may not be as brand noticeable, like a Bradley or a Northeastern Illinois, and then you've got your flagship in the University of Illinois. So these are the schools inside of our state that operate on a D1 level. D2, I mentioned, is pretty diverse. You'll get schools the size of like Hillsdale and a school like Stonehill, but you also get University of California, San Diego, right, competing at the Division II level. Grand Valley State, as Coach mentioned, is in that Great Michigan League. There's a great league up in Minnesota as well, and that East Coast League that St. Anselm competes in. A pretty wide variety of options across the D2 landscape. D3. Again, you're going to find a nice variety of schools here. You'll find some big time academic brands here: NYU, MIT, U Chicago just down the road. U Chicago used to be in the Big Ten, actually, which is kind of fun. But you'll also find those small liberal arts schools that you see all over the Midwest. Some public schools, surprisingly, the Wisconsin system. Every school in Wisconsin, not named Madison, competes in the Wisconsin League. So you've got some variety there. So a good mix of small kind of regional liberal arts schools and some high academic options as well. All right, real quick overview on what the NCAA Eligibility Center is. This used to be called the Clearinghouse. They rebranded a few years back, but essentially serves the same function. It essentially sets a standard for all schools at the scholarship level, the Division I and Division II level. Division III student athletes don't clear the eligibility center, just to be clear. So it's students competing at the Division I and Division II level. It essentially determines your ability to practice, compete, and/or receive athletic scholarships from a university. Okay, it kind of serves as a database, right? I manage that database here for DePaul Prep and our student athletes. So when students are considering competing at the next level, and if Division I or II is on their radar, I always recommend that they get registered with the Eligibility Center. Your continued eligibility at a school is determined through that university's standards, right? So here are the core qualifiers. Okay, essentially graduating from high school is the early mark. The GPA scale for the NCAA is a little unique. It's simplified in a way. It's a 4.0 to 1.0 scale. There is some wiggle room with honors and AP courses, but essentially we're looking at an ABCD scale when we're calculating core GPA. Okay, it's 2.3 GPA to compete at the Division I level, and that's in your core academic areas. And what does that mean, core? Well, for us, it's that English, that 4 years of English you're taking, the math curriculum, our lab science curriculum, our social science curriculum, and our foreign language curriculum. There are some other courses that are deemed approved by the NCAA, like world religions, and there are a handful of the STEAM courses, but essentially we're looking at the core courses. Students would submit their transcript, or I would submit their transcript on their behalf to the NCAA Eligibility Center. From that point, the NCAA determines their core GPA and their eligibility. I can also, for student athletes that might be, might be in that mid 2 points range, maybe a little nervous about things, I can also run their GPA for them from an NCAA perspective, just to see where they are. Here's those qualifiers for Division I one more time. During the time at DePaul, it's very uncommon. In fact, I've not seen it where a student wouldn't naturally meet the curriculum requirements simply by going through our curriculum. But these are the minimums to be considered as qualifiers for Division I. Okay, the big thing here, I'm always talking to students about taking NCAA approved courses. If a student's nervous or has questions about what those courses could look like, they can always check with their counselor, or they can check in with me. Okay. Real quick on early qualifiers. So technically, you're not considered qualified until after you graduate high school. So that 2.3 is at the point of graduation. But we can have early qualifiers after 6 semesters, not including summer after the 3rd year. But once a junior completes their 3rd year in high school, they can be considered what's an early qualifier. That GPA threshold is a little bit higher. But essentially, if you're a B plus student with strong core curriculum, you're likely to land in this early qualifier range. Okay. What's a red shirt? Sometimes we hear this term red shirt. There's other colors too, gray shirts, things like that. But red shirt's a pretty common term. Red shirts can receive athletic scholarship. Red shirts actually can practice. Red shirts are just not competing in intercollegiate athletics. Why do kids redshirt? Could be a lot of reasons. It could be the roster is oversaturated, potentially at their position, and they're trying to save a year of eligibility. It could be that they are trying to develop physically. A number of reasons why a student might redshirt. Essentially, they're a part of the program and they're getting all the benefits of being a part of the program. They're just not utilizing one of their competitive years, typically in their first year, but not necessarily in their first year. Okay. So do your courses count? You can always ask myself, Mr. Ortiz, any of the counselors in the building, but once a student registered with the Eligibility Center, you can click on list of approved core courses. I'm updating that list usually quarterly or at least twice a year. In fact, we just had a number of courses added to the curriculum for next year at DePaul Prep. So I had to submit those for approval. They were all approved. And sometimes kids have questions like, does robotics count? Does sustainability and urban food systems count? You can take a look at that list. You can also touch base with our counseling team. So far, so good. We've had a good run. Sometimes we have to submit like a syllabus to get it approved, but generally speaking, the majority of our curriculum is approved as NCAA eligible. All right, test scores. So I believe it was 2020, 2021, when it might have been a little bit before that, when the NCAA decided to go all in on test optional. In the past, to be eligible, there was a sliding scale that would factor in your SAT and or ACT along with your GPA. So as the GPA and test score sort of like crossed paths, that there was a sliding scale on eligibility there. That's not the case any longer. The NCAA is test optional for 24. Some things to consider, though, when we talk about test optional, is that test scores can still hold value at top tier academic institutions, right? If we're talking about Patriot League schools or high academic schools across the landscape, or Ivy, of course, schools at the Division III level, certainly the high level academic Division III schools. Test scores, although those schools operate in a test optional environment, admission wise, test scores are still valuable, not just to coaches, but to the admissions office. So scores can still play a role. Merit awarding, as I mentioned, full ride academic or athletic scholarships aren't as common as some might think. So it is in a student's best interest to position themselves academically as strongly as they can, to potentially be offered some sort of combination awards, right? This is very common in Division II and at non-revenue generating sports, not the big six in Division I, right? Can we combine academic money with athletic money? How does that look? In Division III, it's a real driver, right? Can we compete, right, with other Division III institutions with our merit money, our academic merit money? And certainly test scores can help contribute to that. And last but not least, and the coaches in the room can maybe talk to this a little later. When students are going through the recruiting process and they're presenting themselves as with a full profile and a resume and a full picture of a student athlete, showing up with strong scores and strong curriculum and strong GPA says a lot to the coach that they're a dedicated student, that they can count on them in the classroom. That they take their academics seriously. I think that speaks to being very recruitable in the process. If a student struggles on the other end or shows inconsistencies in their academics, that can oftentimes create some pause in the recruiting process. Not all times, but showing up with a strong academic resume can definitely offer some advantages in the recruiting process. What's a walk-on? I'm basic. I'm going to go very basic here, as walk-ons can take on different roles and different identities at different schools. Um, there are a couple different layers to this, right? If you're a recruited walk-on offer, that means that the coach has strong interest in you. They've maintained, steady communication. They really like what you bring to the table athletically. But essentially, your roster spot will be earned, right? Um, at the point of arrival on that campus, there is no athletics money attached to your identity, right? Can it be earned? Sure. But at least in that first year, you're not a scholarship student, even at one of the major programs in the major sport. Um, Unrecruited walk-on offers, kind of a true tryout situation. There are actually very prominent Division I programs across the nation that feature very strong walk-on traditions. This is not the case at all schools. Some schools, depending on the coaching staff, may or may not be open to walk-on potential. You still have to qualify for admission through the typical roads. But depending on the school, there could be a pathway to essentially try out or make yourself known to a coaching staff after you arrive on campus. So that's kind of the walk-on scene. All right. I moved pretty quickly. I want to get out of the way for the real experts in the room. Coach, why don't you take it away here?
Sure. Again, Caroline Geisler, head volleyball coach, experience playing volleyball in college and currently a high school coach. I have a few students, as Coach Menestra has been great helping me. I have several students right now in this process, going through this process. He's been very helpful, and having this presentation last year, I know a few of the families have said, has been really helpful. So happy to go through it and happy to be here. High school preparation. So this is what I talk to my athletes about all the time. They're like, hey, Coach G, I want to play in college. I'm like, that's great. How can I help you? Right. And some of the first questions I ask them, do you know what you want to study? Majority of them don't know, and that's totally fine. They will figure it out. I was one of those too. I didn't really know what I wanted to study, but next question, what's important to you in a school? School size, class size, atmosphere, all of those things. Again, something I didn't know. I was just like, I want to play volleyball in college. Didn't really think about these things, really didn't have an answer. Reflecting back, playing at both DePaul University, which is here in Chicago, and then NIU out in far west suburbs. Two very different schools, two very different experiences. Now, like looking back at it, I can kind of pick and choose what I, would have preferred. Get organized. So, first step with these athletes, I tell them they need to figure, logistics out. Maybe have an area in mind. Do you want to go west? Do you want to go east? Do you want to go, north, south? Do you want to stay small? Do you want to go bigger? These are all types of questions that I ask my athletes. And after they kind of figure that out, I have them register with the NCAA and the NCSA, keep their profiles similar across the board. It was a few years back. I looked at a player's profile on different platforms, and then the statistics and the pictures and jersey numbers and all of that weren't very consistent. So my biggest piece of advice, I was like, hey, let's make sure all of these platforms have the same information, consistent. If a coach looks here and then another coach looks here, these are not the same numbers, right? So I wanted to encourage that for them to make sure that there was clarity there. So after applying to both NCSA, NCAA, having that registered, making sure that they have all of their ducks in a row, that they check in, with their counselor, school counselor and college counselor to make sure that they're aware of their desire to play at the next level. So then I could be in communication with them, their families know what needs to be done, things like that. Videos. My assistant coach, he's great with technology and breaking down huddle videos and making all of that feasible for our student athletes. So I'm really lucky there. Huddle's a great tool as well, but to make sure they have their highlight videos of different skills for that specific sport. You know, volleyball would be attacking, serving, passing, blocking, transition, all of that jazz. Making sure you have that video, it's short, it's concise, information's all correct. And then you can link those in those given websites. Beyond that, kind of the organizational piece right there, on top of everything that Coach Manestra said with, you know, grades, being on top of that, making sure all of you know, you have everything fulfilled. I'm kind of speaking from the sport aspect. Start building habits and routine that will help you be successful. This was the biggest thing that I think set me apart compared to a lot of my classmates in high school. That I was very strict about my sleep routine, my nutrition, my time management. I could tell you I missed so many dances in high school. I missed so many, you know, Friday night games or football games and going out and stuff because of my club schedule, because of practice, or, you know, I needed to get a good night's sleep for my club tournament the next morning or whatever it may be. So I was really strict about that. Obviously grades, you know, during my lunch, during my study hall, I was doing my homework because I knew I would have a late night with my practices. And then mental health. Huge now. I probably didn't focus as much as I could have, should have back then, but now the amount of tools and resources our student athletes have is really neat. And some of which I started incorporating as a coach into my volleyball program, which has been really cool, but definitely something that set me aside. And a little side note here, I actually played soccer and basketball in high school too, on top of playing volleyball. So I was a 3-sport athlete. Soccer was actually my jam. Like, I was on varsity my freshman and sophomore year. I played soccer since I was 5. I thought I was going to, my parents and I thought I was going to go play soccer in college. And it probably would have happened, but I fell in love with volleyball. And if I think about Coach Mahoney's slide a few slides ago about the cup filler, cup drainer, I kind of got to that spot that volleyball was filling me up. Volleyball was making me, you know, excited. I was, you know, all in for that. And then on the flip side, soccer was kind of draining me. And it was stressful, and I just wasn't happy with it anymore. And I really had a turning point my sophomore year of high school, where I decided I want to go pursue volleyball in college. My parents weren't very happy. And it took a while for them to be supportive of me. You know, and I don't blame them. They immigrated from Europe. They didn't go to school here in the States. They really had no idea, what it took to, you know, to go to college here in the States and whatnot. So, I had a big decision, and I made that decision, and I committed myself to playing volleyball in college. And I probably threw out that opportunity to have that scholarship, you know, that financial scholarship. So anyhow, I made my decision. I stuck with it. Fast forward, looked at a lot of different opportunities, and DePaul University offered me a preferred walk-on. So as Coach Manestra said, they had an interest. They just didn't have a scholarship. This coach had just transferred from Denver University, and she was in her first year at DePaul. So scholarships were kind of already decided and signed and whatnot. So I was a preferred walk-on. I didn't have to try out or anything. Came in with the rest of the team during that summer, did the preseason, etc. Northern Illinois, I kind of had a tryout. I just came to a practice of theirs. It wasn't an open tryout, but I got to go to a practice. You know, college coaches saw my videos and things like that. And that's kind of how I transferred and played at NIU. But so college, sorry, kind of bouncing around there. College day to day, things to be prepared I think this image of playing Division I just looks so great and sounds so great and whatnot, but it is a lot. And I think a lot of athletes don't know what they're going to experience going to Division I school. At least I didn't. For volleyball, preseason's right before school starts. So, we're on campus early, as a lot of athletes are. But preseason's 3 weeks of grind and grit and 3 days, and it all adds up. And then you're starting school. It's like, holy cow, I'm exhausted already. And it's only preseason. I haven't even started my classes yet. So it's really important to, as I mentioned, to have good habits and routine that will help set you up for success. So, something in season, it's literally you wake up and you're going to practice first, or you're getting your classes out of the way. You might even have to go see if, your trainer or physical therapist, if you have an injury. I had an injury, so I had to make sure I did my PT and whatnot in the morning, went to my classes, straight from classes to practice. It's 2 to 3, sometimes even more for practice. You're already around dinner time right there. You're either doing rehab again, physical therapy. Freshmen have required study halls or study tables. I mean, at least I did. So going to study tables, making sure all your work's done. And that's pretty much a day in the life of an athlete. And you repeat. Not much downtime at all. And then, you include travel into that, whether you're on a bus or you're flying. And then a lot of times you're taking tests and quizzes and whatnot on the buses or in hotel rooms. You're taking these, academic tests. So it is really a grind in season. And, the fall sports, you're at it right away, right when school starts, especially freshman year. It was so eye-opening to kind of experience that. The off season looks something like lifting and conditioning. I remember this at NIU. You're in the cornfields, so bitter cold. It's so windy. We had a 6 a.m. lift session and we had a snowstorm. And there were a few of us, a few minutes late, and that was a big no-no. And I just remember like climbing through snowbanks in order to make it to our lift session back then. And such an experience, but made me who I am today. So I'm very grateful for it. But lifting, conditioning, going to class, practices too. Practices obviously are a little bit shorter and look a little bit different in the off season, more positional based, things like that. Study tables as well. And then you have some tournaments kind of sprinkled in throughout the season. And then that kind of brings you, you're in season, you're off season, and then kind of comes summer. But is this my slide too?
Yes, put on your AD hat. Put on your
Yes. Okay. So that was my college experience as an athlete. Now for athletics. It's really important to have coaches who will assist students and families for these student athletes. So I had to kind of teach myself how to be a coach in this aspect, not an athlete, right? And I was trying to think of what my coaches did and how they helped me. And Coach Menestra has been great in this and helping us. We're trying to kind of combine forces. I know we've had a few meetings there, but it's really important for the coaches to be all in. This takes a lot of work for us out of season, to help our student athletes. And I'm constantly checking in with my athletes, seeing where they're at, how I can help them, how I can assist them. Second bullet point, really important for coaches to have honest and real conversations with these athletes and families. As I mentioned earlier, Division I is big and it's a lot. And truth be told, that number is so small of athletes that actually go to play Division I. And a lot of our athletes are better off and will be more successful, D2, D3. And I think a lot happier too at there. And that's just a better fit for them overall. So really important just to be honest and realistic. And it helps, Coach Ortiz played in college too. So he's helpful, for the baseball players and whatnot. To help kind of guide those student athletes. ask coaches to reach out and have dialogue with those college coaches when and where appropriate. So I have had college coaches reach out to me and kind of ask about those players and, what's their routine like? What's their, temperament like? What's their personality? How are they in the classroom? How are they in the gym? How are they as a teammate? All those intangibles that those college coaches don't see on the court sometimes are more important to a college coach than their actual skill level. Can they deal with the grind? Can they, rise to a new challenge? Can they possibly play a different position than they played in high school? I had a player at Loyola when I was coaching at Loyola Academy. I had a player who played. She was a right side for us in high school, but she was being recruited to be a setter in college. And so that was kind of tough. It's like, well, I'm doing this in college, so I want to play this, I want to play this position, but kind of accepting your role on each team and kind of knowing what your responsibilities are, if that makes sense. So we had a conversation with the college coach saying, we're happy that she's going to play that position for you, but for us, she plays this position and this is how this is, going down and this is how she's responding, obviously in free time, getting extra reps and whatnot, but be a resource to help understand the college recruiting process, like this meeting. This is huge. I've created a handout now, like a checklist for anyone that's interested in playing in college. I hand them this checklist and that's the starting point. So I ask all those questions. What are you looking for? What do you want to study? What size of school? I ask them, have you created your NCAA profile? Have you created your NCSA profile? Do you have a huddle video? Do you have a video, or do you need help with the video? Do you want us to help you with the video, or are you going to go elsewhere? A lot of times, clubs or other programs, they have recruiting coordinators that help. So I know a lot of my volleyball players, they have college recruiting coordinators at their clubs that we kind of work together with. So there's that. Then after they go through that checklist, I usually sit down with the families and I ask the families, if they have questions for me, I try to answer those questions. I try to be of assistance to them. And then we kind of go from there. Like what are the next steps that need to be done? So try to be a resource to them. As I mentioned, statistics, game competition film, all of my athletes and their families have access to that, to Huddle. They get to see all of that. Nothing is hidden from them. Open door policy through and through. And then lastly, educate students about the use of social media. That this has hurt several of our student athletes in the past. Luckily, not as big of an issue when I was in high school or when I was in college, because we didn't, really have as much access, but every day we have those tough conversations of like, if you're serious about this, we have to kind of reconsider what we're doing, what we're putting out there. Is it appropriate? We all know this, right? Everything is seen and heard and documented these days. So just to kind of encourage them to be smart about it.
Excellent advice. We obviously have great resources in the building. Thanks, Coach. I really appreciate you. Let me turn over the perspective to my fellow D3 brother, Coach Ortiz. Maybe share your experiences and what your time was like as an athlete at that Division III level.
Yeah. So out of high school, I came from Lakeview, like I mentioned before. Small program, wasn't super highly recruited by any D1s, honestly, or D2s. I wasn't very big, 5'9", 5'10" in high school. With wet clothes, I was probably 150. Was scrawny and just did not get into the weight room. I was very skilled in my craft, and baseball is a lot of finesse, but I didn't take the weight room very seriously. I think that had a lot to do with my recruitment. But I knew I wanted to go somewhere that was going to play. That was huge for me, that I didn't want to go to a Division I or Division II just to sit on the bench. My goal ultimately was to get drafted in baseball. And in Division III, it's baseball is different than a lot of other sports in the sense that it really doesn't matter the division you're in. You can get picked up by major league teams. Our center fielder at Benedictine got drafted by the Rays. Concordia had 2 guys get drafted, their catcher and their shortstop, by the Orioles and the Nationals. North Central College had a third baseman get picked up by the Red Sox. So there, I mean, the talent was all the way around. But again, in basketball and football, however, I can't recall any guys getting drafted at our level. It's very, very far and few in between. A very slim chance that that'll happen. So for me, again, my angle was very different, that I knew I would want to play. So I got recruited actually at North Central College, and they promised me shortstop and told me everything I wanted to hear. And I went there, and I found out they were telling other players as well that they're going to play in these positions. And then I was like, So I transferred to my second choice school, which was Benedictine. And I got playing time there as a freshman, started, my freshman year, had an okay season. And then my sophomore year, I ended up splitting some time with some other guys, which was a new experience for me altogether, from being a starter forever. And that was tough to me, to really look in the mirror and say, and as mentioned before, there were no scholarships for me as a Division III athlete. Most of my money came from FAFSA and also my grades. I had a pretty good GPA in high school at 3.85. So I got a lot of money from that. So it made it, fairly manageable, but I was definitely still taking out student loans to afford that. Didn't get much help from my family regarding that. So, most Division III schools are private universities or private colleges. They can be on the pricier end, but they also do have creative ways to find money for student athletes, especially if they really want you. So they did help at least make it somewhat manageable. Again, additionally, so when I had that position where I was like, I'm not playing as much, my love for the game started to switch a little bit, and I started to say, I started to see it more as a job, right? I'm going to practices late. We had workouts from 9 to midnight, practice super early in the morning. And the thing about Division III is that there's no guarantee you're going to get drafted, just like any other sport, any other division. But you really, really do have to love the sport and love the game and love the grind, because that is part of the process. So if you're like, I only like the games, but I don't want to work in the weight room, or, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z, or I don't like the study tables, right? Because those are mandatory more times than not, especially for those first years or transfers or freshmen. But you have to love that grind, because you're the one doing it every single day. And again, you have to understand the bigger picture behind it. And if it's very much like, I'm only doing this because of this, or and the motivation to play is outside of what you truly want, then that's gonna be, you're gonna run into some conflict. I will just say that. So yeah, so like I said, I did want to play at the college level. I knew a smaller school was meant for me. I would have gotten lost in a big school. So just understanding what kind of learner I was. So it did really help me making my decision to go where I ended up. I needed that accountability from teachers for them to know me. I felt like if I was just a number at a very large school, I think I would have gotten distracted, and maybe my path would have gotten off railed a little bit. But the baseball culture really helped me a lot. Again, study tables were mandatory. I needed that structure. I didn't know what it was like. So they provided me that, especially coming out of high school, just having that, hey, at these times, 2 hours, you have to get schoolwork done. And it just being part of our schedule was critical for me. Time management was a challenge, getting used to what that free time looked like, from being a high school student to now college. Also, something that made Division III a little bit different than what I've heard from the Division I schools and maybe Division IIs, but I know that at a certain part of the year, there was a lot of months where the coaches could not really interact with us. They were not meant to coach us. They couldn't give us any programs, that sort of thing. So that was one thing that I recall from my experience, that once the season was over, it was over. So I had basically summer ball. They gave us like a weightlifting program, that sort of thing, but they are pretty hands off. Then I don't know how that translates to any other division, but I know that was my experience. We still had fall ball, but it wasn't like, like the actual season. But yeah, so like I said, I did hit a fork in the road that one year, and I had to make a decision. Am I going to continue at Benedictine and keep playing baseball, paying as much money as I was paying to sit on the bench? And I had a gut check moment where I really realized, like, this is the sport that I love. I think I would have some regret if I transferred as a sophomore going into my junior year and I didn't finish out, what I started and what my goals were. So I got into the weight room, I kind of toughened up, and it was a spot that I really had to see what am I willing to do? Am I willing to sacrifice this and put in the work? As well too, I had to learn a new position. So being a shortstop my entire life, shifting over to third base was something new, and it could hit your ego, right? I'm a linebacker. I'm not going to play this position. I'm not going to be a defensive end, or I'm a point guard. I don't want to be a shooting guard now. Like, that's not me. You really have to humble yourself to a certain degree and see what the bigger picture is. Because if you want to get on that, if you really want to get drafted or be seen, it's impossible when you're on the bench. You will never get. No one is going to know. No coaches at the next level are really going to see you play when you're not actually playing. So. Again, for me, my last 2 cents here was that it was definitely a sport that I've always loved since I was 3 years old. I still love it to this day. So you have to have that passion that is bigger than just the external factors or the external motivators. And again, you really have to enjoy the grind. And yeah, again, you really have to love it. So, last
That's
thing.
great perspective. Great perspective. Yeah.
I do have one
Go
last
ahead.
thing. When I coached at Concordia, one thing I will mention, which is also a Division III, when it came to the recruiting process, there was very little patience for coaches who would spend time with students that had, again, this is at the Division III level, with very low grades, very poor marks, just didn't have that motivation for school. At the D3 level, again, they're spending as much time as they are trying to recruit you. They don't want to worry about a student becoming ineligible. And to go to someone's high school games and recruit them can be a very time-consuming process. So something to really keep in mind, that you really want to make sure the student part comes first, and then the athlete will definitely come second.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good advice. And to kind of play off what Coach Ortiz just shared about knowing what kind of environment works for you, right? He was able to tap into that identity of, like, this is where my learning style is gonna shine, right? Because it's a true student athlete identity. He was able to find that in his moment. Before I get to Coach Adam, our former employer, our then athletic director at Elmhurst, Paul Crone. It's funny how you find your way to certain scenarios. I late in my high school career, I knew I wasn't ready to give up that part of me. And to your point, Coach Ortiz, it's that grind. I loved that. I loved that grind, the brotherhood of the sport I was involved in. But I went and looked at a small school. It was late in my senior year, like it was snowing, so it had to be February or March. And I came from nowhere, small town Michigan, and what honestly got me convinced that Division III program, that coach at the time, he was the head coach, was where I needed to be. Is a few days later we got home, and a letter arrives at my house, and it's Coach Crone, handwritten. He remembered my father and mother's names, first names, and immediately I felt like, if this is how they treat you in the recruiting process, I mean, this is a picture into how they're going to treat you as a student there. And sure enough, that place was home for me for, I don't know, 10, 15 years, even as a professional. So pay attention to how people treat you in the recruiting process. It matters a lot. Coach Adam.
Yeah, I've got a lot of years in coaching, and I being from the Midwest, didn't think I'd come out to the East Coast, but here I am. I played 1 year at Minnesota State Mankato, and then just due to family challenges, like I said, I'm first generation. I had to kind of go back home and work and try to keep the lights on at the house. So that was a true reality for me. And I do believe this is living your own reality, and don't compare yourself to your friends and to your neighbors and so on and so forth. So I knew my true passion was coaching football, and I made every decision from that point on, when I was 19 years old, to get me to this point. And with the grace of God and a lot of luck, I've been coaching at multiple levels, and taken a lot of different programs to from basically the ashes, and have risen them. So and just having a perspective of going and recruiting at a Division III school, which was all academic merit and financial aid based, and then going to the highest level where it's in Syracuse at the ACC, it's in the sport of football, it's Division I, and it's a full scholarship or it's nothing. And so you're either getting that full scholarship or you're walking on and you're paying the freight. And then you get to a place like this at St. Anselm, and we stack. And what I mean by that is we stack merit, financial aid, and athletic aid. So that's how we can kind of help with the cost of attendance. And what I tell all families is basically, wherever you go, whether it's Division II, Division III, your academic and merit scholarship is actually going to be more than what your athletic scholarship is. So if you're one of those families that's banking on the athletic scholarship to pay for the rest of college, that's it's a little bit of a pipe dream, and it can happen, no doubt, but you have to be identified early on, and your student athlete really has to be the top of the top in their sport, and they really have to love it, and they almost have to treat it like a second job, because that's what it really is in college. And so there's great athletics at all different levels. And the thing that I found in coaching at all these places, and it didn't matter whether in 2012 at Elmhurst College we were playing for the conference championship, which we won, or we're playing against Deshaun Watson at Clemson when I was at Syracuse, or we're going back to back winning seasons here for the first time in school history this past year. To the student athletes, it's about the experience, and it's all about the relationships and the inter-squad relationships they have with the team as well as with the coaches. And it's those relationships you'll remember some of the important games, and I know Coach Minestra and I will get together time from time and share some of those big wins that we had at Elmhurst. But more importantly, you share the experiences and lifelong relationships that you have that are built and formed in that locker room and in that weight room and on that field or the court in whatever sport you're playing. And so that's what makes sports the greatest thing ever, to be able to play for the love of the game. And sometimes in our society now, you're seeing it with the transfer portal and NIL and the combination of those two. We've lost our idea of what sports should truly mean, and that's to play, right? And it's still the same game when you're 10 years old that you used to play for free on a court somewhere, on a dirt field, whatever it might be. And so when you think it's getting hard, when you think it's a job, think about that. Right. Think about those times when you do that. And so, we just capped off a very successful signing day here, signing 30 athletes from different parts of the country. So, I've had a great perspective and a great ride in this collegiate model, and very blessed, as you can see the graphic, to be honored with the Coach of the Year in the NE10 last season.
Good stuff. Coach, I wonder if you can share with the families. You've coached it. You've been blessed to coach it at multiple levels. Is there a as you've built relationship with coaches and student athletes across all the levels? Is there something that you see that connects all of those student athletes together? Something that divisions don't divide? Is there something you see across divisions that you can point to? Is that student athlete's going to be pretty successful?
Yeah, I think you have to start with the academic piece, right? And as you know, in education, there are people that are just naturally gifted, right? Academically, like they just get it. But I talk a little bit about more of the lifetime learner, the person that is striving to challenge themselves academically, striving to gain knowledge. And that is really the growth that is college, right? And it doesn't matter if it's big school, small school, because I think anybody can kind of, depending on where you go to high school, some obviously are more rigorous, like your curriculum, and some are maybe not. And so I think it really falls into, is that student athlete a lifetime learner, right? And do they have the chops to be able to have time management, right? And be able to not major in Xbox and Netflix, as I say, which there are a lot of distractions in college, right? The schedules are different, as Coach was talking about. A lot of high school kids are used to 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then 3 to 5 practice, and you get to college and your Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8:15 to 9:15, then you have an hour block of time, and it's how you manage that time, which equals your success or your struggle. And so that's, I think, just finding people that are academically viable for the colleges, and some of them are very, very similar to that, but just finding that ability to want to learn all the time.
Yeah, that's good. That's a really good segue. I'm going to invite you guys to stay with me on this. I put together just kind of some bullet points for families to be thinking about as they're approaching. It could be first year at DePaul, it could be your last. Just a plan of action. Coaches, feel free to jump in on this. Obviously, you're hearing a theme throughout the presentation that academic performance is a priority in a lot of ways. But I think, to Coach Geisler's point, I mean, having open conversations with your current coach, whether that's a club side or your varsity coach here, or even your sophomore or JV coach here at DePaul, is just sharing your intentions. I think I find that, if coaches kind of know where you stand, and as coaches, as Coach Adam and coaches from all around the country are visiting with our students, they're also interested in how the coaches feel about those student athletes too. Attending sports camps when you can, not overdoing it. Different sports are going to require different things of you, right? There's ID camps across a lot of different styles of sports, and some get started earlier than others. But again, talking to your coaches about what those look like, what those opportunities could be. And you can start messing around with the NCAA portal, but those are some of the main points. I really like a multi-sport athlete, and Coach Adam, I'm sure you recruit a wide variety of student athletes. It's hard to deny a kid who likes to be competitive in the off season. Am I right?
Totally. We have, I want to say two of the guys we just signed who are super, super athletes in wrestling. We just started track here at this college. We have, believe it's 6 or 7 student athletes that are running track this spring, and comboing with the football. I am a huge, huge fan, and I will always be a huge fan of people that compete in more than one sport, because I think the skill sets translate.
Mhm.
And I do believe that if you're a competitor in football, you're a competitor in basketball, you're a competitor in wrestling. People like to compete, right? And so I will give the nod to a guy who will play more than one sport than a guy that just focuses on one thing.
Mhm. Yeah. In sports, Coach Geiser, you as an AD, you see our lacrosse players. You see some special, I would call them specialty sports, where we're often seeing that creep into the younger years, where some of those, especially club teams, are encouraging them to specialize.
Mhm.
How are you managing those conversations with younger athletes?
I would actually really throw volleyball into that. Volleyball
Volleyball.
has somehow really became or become a kind of like a solo sport. And I'm like, we've had a few trickle into, soccer, playing, lacrosse and other things. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to be their biggest fan on the sidelines of playing another sport, believe it or not. Just because, as coach just mentioned, it translates. Like once an athlete, you're competitive, you're going to put in that effort. It helps prevent burnout. It gives you a different coach. It gives you a different team reality, team sense, things like that. But, from coach's perspective, I'm super supportive of it. Those conversations, I'm like, yeah, as long as, when you get a chance to play volleyball or get those reps in, or, um, then do it, right? You can do that at home. You could pass against the side of your house. You don't have to play club volleyball in order to get repetitions in and be a good volleyball athlete. I get asked this all the time, what club do you want to play for? Or, where should I go? Or what college camps should I do and stuff? And I really try to tread lightly with those conversations, because I don't want them to think, I'm all in for just volleyball, because I'm supportive of all. And as an athletic director, here I am supporting all of our student athletes. But it's a tough conversation, and a lot of people have kind of streamlined into one sport. When I was in high school, you wanted to be a 4-year, 3-sport athlete. They used to give out awards, like these blankets and awards to 12, we call them 12 sport athletes, right? That, finished high school playing all 4 years, 3 sports. And I can't tell you the last time I've seen one of those at the high school level.
Mhm.
And it's sad at one point, and on the other, I'm like, where did that shift occur? How do we change it? How do we kind of bring that passion back? Will we ever see it again? That's a bigger conversation, I think, but yeah, I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah. Check in with your bucket, right? As Coach Mahoney might say, like,
Yeah.
are you doing it? Are you doing it for the passion? Or are you doing it for some other purpose, right?
Hmm.
All right. So for our juniors in the room, this is where I think in most of my conversations with our junior students, is this is where they're really starting to like kind of hone in on their post-secondary plan. Um, Academics, we're going to put at the top, obviously. Um, but this is where we're going to do some more formalized things, right? You're likely taking your first standardized test as a junior. Okay. You'll start doing more formal conferences with our team, with the college team, and it's very likely you're in your first year on varsity, or first true year contributing on a varsity program in most cases. This is also when we're going to start beginning the process of recruitment, right? We might be visiting some campuses casually, right? We're certainly filling out prospective questionnaires. Okay. This is where unofficial visits can start to happen, right? And depending on the sport and depending on the timing of the calendar, this is where true conversations can start taking root with college coaches. Coaches, any advice for juniors as they're approaching their process here?
Yeah, I would start with especially in our sport, towards the end of your 11th year, it's really beneficial to have your if possible, have an unofficial transcript electronically on your phone.
Mm.
And so because we're doing a lot of pre-reads from the academic side of the house to look at what admission may look like. And so if I find a potential student athlete, I may say, hey, you know what? Because we still have a little time, obviously, to wait for the financial aid perspective, but let's start to look and see, like, hey, I've really liked this prospect at camp, or I've really enjoyed the conversations and the communication. Let's see if this athlete is a good fit for us as a college. And so I can take that, and we have a system here where I can take that unofficial and upload it to our recruiting database and have, real interaction with our admission team here. And so that has been hugely beneficial, along with your NCAA ID number being on your social media. is hugely beneficial to make it easier for recruiters to get through all the wave of prospects to get to your specific prospect file.
Good. All right, and for seniors in the group, okay, as I mentioned before, eligibility runs through the 4 years of high school, keeping those grades tight, super important. And I also say, if you're in a sport or you're in a position where you're going to be maybe a mid-year recruit, right? There are a lot of Division III programs. They ramp up their high-level activity sometimes in late fall, early December, depending on the sport. If you're a spring athlete, right? Oftentimes late offers can come through. Keeping those grades solid senior year is super important. Yeah, if we're making sure at this point we're registered with the eligibility center, as Coach Adam mentioned. They're gonna cross-check that with their database. Keeping your resume up to date. Student athletes that don't have like kind of an active one-page resume, that could mean huddle highlights, that could mean, general accomplishments, both academic and athletic. You should have a solid resume ready to either digitally deliver or hand deliver to coaches when you meet with them. The thing with application requirements is you'll get a ton of coaching here and a ton of support here on the application side of things, but understanding that there are admission deadlines that may or may not run in tandem with the more casual conversations you may be having with coaches, right? Committing to a college doesn't necessarily complete your process, right? You have to go through the formal process of applying to that school. So make sure you're working with your college counselor and your college side coach on what those deadlines look like. Oftentimes, the college coach who's recruiting you will be able to coach you through what window would be appropriate for you to apply. If there's an early window, if they want you to apply early decision, if there's a regular window, they have a much tighter partnership with their admissions team. So make sure you're applying in the proper lane. And I think the biggest thing is just clarity and honesty throughout the whole process. One thing that we've lost with the transfer portal and a little bit with the NIL is I think some of the authenticity, some of the honesty in the process has gotten cloudy. So making sure that you're maintaining solid relationships. If you have, if you have conversations open with a number of coaches, just be open with those coaches in return and demand the same from them. I think communication is key throughout this process, front to back. So, any parting thoughts, coaches? Anything you'd add to the mix?
I would just say, stay organized, stay passionate about it. And just kind of stay true to kind of your heart and what you want. It was really tough to kind of go against what my parents wanted me to do and kind of what I wanted to do. Just kind of stay true to it. Do what makes you happy. Do what fills your cup, and it will all work out. Even if you're going against the grain or against, what your friends are doing, as was mentioned a few times too. Go small if that's what makes you happy. Go big if that's what you want. Just kind of stay true to it, and you can always change your mind if it doesn't work out. But yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. Coach Adam, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say when you get towards the end, the two biggest I think mistakes that I see are, one, not finishing the application materials in a timely manner. And so I equate it to, if I ask you to run a 12-yard curl and you keep running it at 8 yards, like, I'm probably not going to put you in the game, right? So if I have to continually ask a student athlete for weeks upon end to, hand pieces in of the application materials, that just tells me you're just not serious. And we believe in valuing coaches' times, but I believe in valuing the student athletes' times and the families' times as well. And so, we all want the same thing. We want to see who we're going to invest in, and the student athlete wants to know where am I going to spend the next 4 years that'll equate to the next 40 years of success? And the second piece is when you get to the end is don't let another school or another player make the college decision for you. And what I mean by that is if it looks right and you've looked at the finances and you've kicked all the tires and you'd opened up the doors and you'd answered all the questions, say yes to it, you know? And so if you're going to go back and forth over, you know, $1,000 difference between two schools, you may lose that opportunity. And that's a true statement. And it's happened multiple times in the cycles I've been here. And you know, we want people here that believe in the same things that we believe and that understand the culture. So if you look at an opportunity and it may be a Division II or maybe Division III, and they may have certain roster numbers or depending on the sport, if you're in a position and they give you an opportunity to say yes and you feel like it's right, then I say you go with it, because if you walk outside of that building, there might be another recruit that comes in behind you and says yes and takes the opportunity. So that's a realization in recruiting right now with the transfer portal, with there being more spots or less spots and more student athletes. And so there's just something to think about when you get towards the end and it's decision-making time.
Good stuff. Well, families, we thank you for your time. Coaches, we thank you for your time. I think the lesson learned today is really goes back to the root of what we hope all of our students are learning across the board, that it starts with you and your responsibility. Check in with your value set. We drill it into our students all the time. Identify your values and lean into those. Coaches, thank you. Families, this will be available to you online. We'll have it up. I believe we have a YouTube channel now, which is fun. And it'll also be on our college planning page. So thanks for spending time.